Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today we are going to be talking about how do we as an industry tackle the big issues. This is coming off the back of what I posted yesterday, the video that I posted yesterday, as well as the current C market, which today closed at 88.68. And for those of you who were listening to the podcast for the first time and have no idea what that number means, it means that coffee is being traded on the C market, the futures coffee commodity market, at 88.68 cents per pound. So as you can imagine, it's very, very low. And it is but one of the major issues that we as an industry are facing that need to be tackled. We are in an interesting time. Why we are in an interesting time is because as a society, we are at a bottleneck in history where the things that we seem to have been gotten off scot-free from in the past are no longer escapable. So the C market has been a shit show for many years. The way we treat gender equality in our industry has been a shit show for many years. The inequality throughout the supply chain and the way that people are paid has been a shit show for many years. We are no longer in an era of history where we can hide from the reality of what's going on. We can no longer hide because of the greatest invention of modern times, which is the internet. Everything is so much more accessible. Communication is so much more widely available to everybody. And we're talking more. We're communicating more. We can hold each other accountable more. And this is a great thing. And so when we look at things that are going on today, we see them in real time compared to previous decades where they could be hidden. And unless they were big enough and important enough, they wouldn't make it onto the news. And if they didn't make it onto the news, well, chances were no one was going to know about it. Now, every single person's Instagram account is a news outlet. Every single person's social media platform is their own PR agency. And we need to think about how we're going to approach these big issues. I posted today on the Map It Forward Instagram the question, what do people think is actually broken in the coffee supply chain? And what are the proposed fixes? And the reason I wanted to point that out is because there is no one thing that is broken about the coffee supply chain. And if we're going to tackle big issues, we need to look at them holistically. In a previous life, I used to be a project manager for IBM. And we used to take big projects and we used to look at how we were going to be able to approach them, assuming that reaching the end goal was the only option. And I want to approach these kinds of projects the same way. We've got some big things to tackle. And Map It Forward is perfectly positioned to start conversations around those big issues. But also, we're in a position to remain neutral to get these things fixed. So moving forward, and I've spent a lot of time this year, but very intensely in the last couple of days, thinking about, how do we get some really serious action items happening about this? No one organization, no one podcast, no one business, no one voice is going to be able to fix this. We have to have a united front on how to do this. And what I suspect is going to be the way that we fix this situation that's going on with the supply chain is that we have to have a very organized, multifaceted approach. When I was at university studying genetics, they had decided, by they, I mean the big scientists that were leading genetics at the time. This was a couple of decades ago now. But they decided they wanted to map the Human Genome Project. And no one lab can do it. It was too enormous a task. And so what they did was they decided that they would bring on board labs from all over the world and hand out little pieces of work that they were all responsible for mapping. I suspect that fixing a lot of the issues that we have to face as an industry is going to mean that we're going to need to sit down as an industry and say, well, okay, who is the best person at tackling this little bit? And who is the best person at tackling this little bit? And the best person at tackling this little bit? And then we connect all of them together, all conspiring to the same outcome. We all got to get on board with the same agenda. And I suspect that rightfully so, I suspect that there's some suspicious agendas about, well, who the fuck's going to run this thing? We can't have corporations doing it. They may have the money, but if they run it, no one's going to trust it. And that's why I think that we need to bring together a bunch of people that can resource the projects that are ahead of us. It was proposed to me a couple of days ago that Map It Forward should consider hiring a journalist, an investigative journalist, to start digging into what is really going on with the coffee supply chain. And I love that idea. We don't have the funds to do that at this point. But that's going to change. So we're going to open a new line of sponsorship up on the podcast. And I'm going to reach out to a bunch of corporates, a bunch of businesses that can afford to sponsor this podcast. And we're going to use that money to start getting somebody who's not in the industry to actually start digging around to see what's going on. I think it's going to be important. I'm going to start reaching out to some journalists and I'm not talking like, oh, let's see if we can get a journalism student. No, I'm going to start looking for ex-New York Times investigative journalists and see if they'd freelance on this and see what we can dig up. Because I don't know what the fuck's going on, but this is all way, way more complex than a lot of people get. And a lot of people understand. It's way, way over my head. It's way, way over the heads of most of the people who I speak to that I think know lots about this. There are a lot of pieces and a lot of people who stand to benefit from things being presented a certain way. I'm not interested in that. I want to know the truth. And so I'm letting you guys know that we're going to start trying to raise funds through this podcast so that we can pay for an investigative journalist to create an article for this. I'm also considering if we can raise enough funds, putting together a documentary of what this investigative journalist finds out. The only way we're going to get to the bottom of what is going on and how we end these cycles. As I said in yesterday's episode of the podcast, this is not new. What's going on right now with these coffee farmers cutting down their trees And with the C market being so low, this is not new. It is cyclic. These cycles happen almost predictably. It's a supply and demand thing. This one seems to be a bigger problem than normal because there's technology that has presented itself that's allowed, or that isn't stopping the supply. And, this could drag this out longer. Who knows? We don't know. But we do want to stop it from being something that remains a long-term issue. If we don't, from my conversations yesterday and today with different farmers, what's going to happen is that the small guys are going to be wiped out. And we don't want that. We need, like with everything, we need small business. We need the farmers there, the smaller farmers, to present an option for those who don't want to do business with big business. And all these things are really important. Again, diversity in everything is helpful. It's great. It's important. It keeps everybody more honest. So we got to do what we can to find out what's really going on. If we don't understand the issues for what they are and just go off and make a bunch of assumptions that this thing is evil and that person's creating all the problems, or fuck this big corporate, they're doing all these problems and they're creating all this evil, well, that doesn't help, because that's not the actual truth of what's going on. And what we should be looking for is the truth. Okay? So, if you would like to sponsor this podcast so that the money can go towards hiring the right people, a freelance investigative journalist that is going to start digging around, and I doubt it's just going to be one person. This person's going to be going to need to go to origins. They're going to need to go and be able to do their own investigations at different parts of the world. It's going to be expensive. But if you're interested in helping to support it, and please know that if you sponsor this podcast, you will not be able to influence the content. That is absolutely a no deal. If you are expecting that sponsoring this podcast means that I'm going to be more favorable to representing your agenda, no bueno. Not going to happen. No one will ever influence what I talk about. So, if you are interested in helping to fund this idea that I have moving forward, and helping to fund us putting all the pieces together so that we can build the project to fix it, then please get in contact with me, lee@mapitforward.org. That's LEE at mapitforward.org. We are going to sort this out, friends. It's going to take us some time, but we are going to sort this out. Peace, love, and peanut butter.